everyone. Sorry, it's loud. My name is Kevin Setatom, member of the board of directors of Midwest Clinic, and it's always an honor to be able to introduce these clinic sessions because our presenters they've worked hard to create something that's very worthwhile and educational and meaningful. It's even better when you get to introduce your college roommate for the session. So yes, Dr. Knight and I, way before we were doctors, roommates when we went to Baylor University 100 years ago. So he has a terrific presentation offered to us about tying art to score study, making it more interesting, and I know it's going to be just terrific. So would you please welcome Dr. Chris Knight from the University of Arkansas.
Good afternoon. I think we have more people here than handouts available. So if you did not get one, would you please point your devices to this link, bands.uark.edu. We have more than 75 images to cover in less than an hour. And we're going to rip through some things pretty quickly. And a lot of those we're going to spend quite a bit of time on, and I'm going to ask you to really kind of dig into those pretty deeply. So if you haven't found those, if you haven't gone there, please do that now. This is a session on score study and on the surface. But much more than that, this is a session on inspiration. Not inspiration of our students, but inspiration of how we can become better teachers and how we can maybe look at some new ways to look at scores, maybe with fresh eyes, fresh ideas. And if you leave with nothing else today other than thinking about what is it that really inspires you, that would be great. What is it that inspires you? What is it that absolutely grabs you and really resonates inside you? For some people, that's music. For some people, that's teaching. For some people, it's gardening. For some people, it's great meals. We're having a lot of that this week. For some people, it's bourbon or cheese or cigars. For some people, it's fitness, bodybuilding. It could be faith or ministry or volunteering, Civil War reenactment, moon landing, conspiracy theories, whatever it is. I think all of us at some point have something that we really get into that really inspires us. And when we find those things, we start to seek out more information. We go to Google, we start to do searches, we start to be involved in the activity, we maybe order a book or check out a book to read more about it. Maybe we find people in our area where we live with a common interest. We start to pursue that more and more, and then we start to build up some experience with that. All of that is informal education. And that's very, very different than what almost all of us in this room went through in our music ed degrees, which is formal education. Almost all of us went through a very particular path, which was known as the degree requirements. And those degree requirements are categorized into very specific areas. So in your degree requirement, at probably almost any institution you went into, you have something that's called general education requirements, English, science, math, etc. Within the music portion of your degree, you may have had an area that focuses on music theory, music history. There may be another track towards music education. When you meet people that went to the same institution before or after you, many of our conversations are, oh, did you have Mr. Searle for theory? Or did you have Dr. Meisenhelter for music ed? Right? We identify those tracks even by some people. Or, as the case of Kevin Setatom and I, we equate certain tracks in our music ed degrees at Baylor with specific areas of the building. You know, we went downstairs in the basement to the back hallway for music ed. And the trumpet studio was up there, and the applied was over there. All those things are very sectionalized in our formal education. Hopefully, the intent is that at some point before we have our ultimate experience in that degree, all of those things combine, and by the time we get to student teaching, we start to see how those things are really connected, much more than they were maybe when they were taught in these different areas. So this session, I want to begin with a quote from Brené Brown. I think some of you probably know Brené Brown, one of the most popular YouTube recordings or TED Talk recordings there are. She's had millions and millions of viewings of this. And and has written several books since that TED Talk. She's been asked by many business professionals to come in and speak to corporations. Her research was on the area of vulnerability, particularly how do we get through shame related to vulnerability, and what are the advantages of vulnerability to help us become better people. How do we remain open? How do we allow ourselves to be more authentic, that kind of thing. She finally wrote a book on leadership, it came out about 2 months ago, and this is the basic premise in this quote. I think this is a fantastic quote for teachers. Because although we're not leading in a corporate sense with corporations, you are absolutely leading every day. You're leading young people, whatever age you teach, you're leading young people to more expanded intellect. You're providing experiences and activities that are enriching in ways that they would never have the opportunities to experience without you in their lives. You are helping them become better musicians. You're helping them with skill development. You're absolutely leading. And hopefully you realize, I think we all do at some point as teachers, the more we can stay curious and ask the right questions, the more compelling our teaching becomes. So again, regardless of the age of students that you teach, I think the more we can ask the right questions and stay dialed into those things, the better we are as teachers. So with regard to inspiration, what I'm going to try to do is, one of the things that really inspires me is art. I have no background in art other than sitting in Mr. Nelson's elementary art class in Tulsa, Oklahoma at Walt Disney Elementary. It was a great experience, but I have no formal training in art. So this is just something that I stumbled into, frankly, because I come to Midwest a lot. And the first time I came here, I went to the Chicago Institute of Art and I was blown away by what I had seen. Some of those things I had seen before, but it honestly was life-changing to see that. What I've noticed after coming here more than 15 times is I go back and I see those paintings and I learn different things about them. So just as a departure point, as a way to transfer some of these ideas to you, I'm going to talk a little bit about art, but hopefully you can think about what are the things that inspire you. And let's think today about the fact that our formal education set us up for our vocation. Formal education set us up for our vocation. Our informal education continues to inspire us for our avocation, or our hobby. What can we do to take the things that inspire us in our hobbies, or our things that we're really passionate about, and apply that to our teaching, to then in turn become better teachers? In other words, to be better prepared in different ways through score studying for our students. So I'd like to begin with this. This is an aerial view of a railroad yard. And you know the whole point here, parallel tracks. We can stack information in cars, and as the cars go or push through the railroad yard, we can start to merge these sets of cars into longer sets and eventually attach them to an engine, and it goes out into one track on its own to deliver that material to someplace useful. This is a really good metaphor for us with regard to the music ed stuff I just mentioned and our degree requirements, but this is also a really good metaphor for us in terms of score study. So we start to dig a little bit deeper into score study, recognize that each one of these tracks could be something different that we might study in a score. Right? You might be a person who looks more than anything else for motives, or melody, excuse me, harmony, form, structure, dynamics, style, expressive markings, the context of the piece, why it was written, how it was written, for whom it was written. All of those things are parallel tracks. And again, hopefully by the time we get to the end of this yard, we're thinking about how we can combine all these things in score study. So as a departure point for this, we're going to talk about art. I'm going to try to take you out of our comfort zone of music, and let's start talking about art, assuming that none of us know a whole lot about it. Would you think for a moment about what are the tools that a painter uses to create a painting? To be very specifically, what does he or she do when they walk into a room and they're about to create something? What are the tools that they use? This is an MRI. It's a single slice of a part of the human brain. Physicians use these to diagnose incredibly valuable information that helps save lives. If we took a whole stack of these and were able to construct a whole human body from the top down, No physician would tell us, even though there's useful information here, they wouldn't tell us, I know everything about this person now. Most of us study the way we were taught to study. And when we talk about score study, what do most of you do? What do you look for? Most people say harmony, right? In college, most of us were taught to study scores by dissecting scores and labeling the vertical slices. So here's another metaphor for us. This can provide a lot of information, but if we look at a whole set of these images of an entire human body, we still don't understand the story. If you can dissect a piece of music and label every single chord, you still don't have the whole story, right? I don't mean to offend any music theorists. The analytical part, the harmonic analysis part, is extremely important. It's vitally important. But it's one that many of us think that is what we should do when we study scores. I asked several people in preparation for this, what do you do when you study a score? And I got answers like, well, I make sure I have my pencils and I do a full harmonic analysis with Roman numerals. Other people said, I don't do that as much as I used to, but I find the tonal centers. One person said to me, I used to teach high school band, but now that I teach junior high, I don't have to do any analysis anymore. So this is a metaphor for the importance of finding these slices, but recognizing that maybe there's a lot more to this. Okay, so to the analogy of the painter, what is the painter using? What tools do they have? This is mine. Some of you know Bob Ross. He had a painting instructional show on PBS from '83 to '94. Bob Ross is a former Marine drill sergeant who retired from the U.S. Marines and wanted to do something very different. And somehow he convinced PBS that he should have a show where he does nothing but talk to people about painting. It's just him. This is what you see for 30 minutes. How many of you have seen Bob Ross before? Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, just about everybody. So you know that there are no accidents. There are only, right? There's no mistakes. There's only happy accidents, right? He has a huge following now, like a second life, much longer after he passed away, and almost a cult following on YouTube now. I think when most people think about artists and what tools they use, they think about the stuff that's on that palette, right? What are the colors that they use? They might put a little green, a little red, or as you would say, a little bit blue, right? Or all those things. But that would be like a composer saying, I use C, D, and E. That's it. Or, I'm a young band composer, I use flats. Or something like that. He talked a lot about things that he would have us make. He would speak to you as though you're also painting at home. So he would ask you to create a mysterious shed in the woods, or majestic mountains, or sun-drenched, snow-capped peaks, or wispy trees, an imaginary forest. He was really good at selling adjectives, basically, right? I've talked to so many people that said, yeah, I love Bob Ross. Used to watch it all the time and know how to paint. And I'd say, heck, do you paint? No, I've never painted, but I know I could do it because I watch Bob Ross, right? He's really good at taking people into the imagery, and he takes you out of the craft directly into your right brain and convinces you your shed is mysterious, right? But what he was really doing with us was telling us all about the specific elements of art. And this is why I want to get you in part out of music to look at this differently. All right, he's teaching about elements of art without really talking about it. A mysterious shed is about line and form and structure. Do you see that? Majestic mountains are about mass. Sun-drenched, snow-covered peaks are about contrast, right? Contrast of light and dark, perhaps. Wispy trees are about texture. He never taught us, let's make a straight line, let's make a mass. He just went straight to the adjectives. Not even let's make a shed, let's make a mysterious shed. Imaginary forest. Do you see background, foreground, contrast, opposition? Check this one out. line, texture, foreground, background, opposition. You see the lines of the dead trees up front, the slight color in the front against all the white in the back, the texture of the clouds. I'm not suggesting that Bob Ross was a really good painter. Maybe he was, I don't know, I can't judge. But I think he was a really good teacher. Because he taught us a lot about craft without ever mentioning it. Right? How many of you learned to analyze in theory class by the intent of a score or the meaning of a score as opposed to Roman numerals? You see what I mean? Score study and the analysis of chords is dissecting it, and that's very important, but there's much more than that. I think if we brought in composers today, most of them would tell us, I don't compose with vertical slices in mind. Right? They're looking at the longer line. So here's a list of a few elements of art that we've already talked about. What I find interesting about this is that each of these has a parallel in music. Line could be related to melody, or motives. Form, maybe a color palette. I don't mean the actual palette you have the colors on, but the palette of the painting. Like a film can have a color palette. The color palette of a painting could be the harmony or the tonality. The texture or the color could be the orchestration. Maybe the orchestration could affect the color too. Intensity or hue could be dynamics. There's painting techniques. You've seen paintings up close where some are very jagged and it looks like people just literally threw paint on there. There's globs of paint that have dried. Others where the paint is totally smooth. That's very intentional on some painters' part, is to get the texture of that, to get you to respond to that. Okay, so look at the right column. Where do you spend most of your time when you study scores? I think most of us would say harmony. You know the phrase, we teach as though we were taught? You heard that before? We teach as though we were taught. Most of us, when we began our careers, or are about to begin our careers as music educators, find that we teach and say and do a lot of things that our primary teachers did in college or in high school. You've thought about that before? Many of the things that you do, not only teaching methods, but even the things that you say, are things that you picked up along the way. Maybe from applied teachers or private teachers too. So let's back the picture away and start to see how some of these tracks can fit together. And look at how all of these separate tracks in score study might lead to something other than score study, but to something much further than that, score comprehension. I'm not sure, the older I get, I'm not sure that score study is the complete package. It's not just what we're looking for, it's how do we comprehend it. Okay, so this is American Gothic by Grant Wood. Years ago, I was in drum corps, and one summer we tried to find the funkiest, craziest shirts that we could find for tour, and I found a shirt with this on it. And I was so proud of that shirt, and I probably wore that for 4 or 5 summers. It was completely worn out. About 5 years ago, I came across an article on the web about this painting, and I started reading it, and I realized 2 or 3 paragraphs into it, it was telling me all kinds of things I never knew about this painting. So I stopped, and I went back and I just spent time looking. And that's really what started all of this. So I'd like for you, either on your devices or if you can see it here, to take a look at this. I know that you're all familiar with this. This is one of several paintings we'll look at today. One that's also kind of made its way into pop culture so much in America that people, when they see it, they usually smile and go, oh, yeah, that color. So would you just take a look at that for a minute, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about it. I asked someone recently what this was about, and she said, farmers. And somebody else said, this is the patriarchal view of American society. Somebody else said, she's really pissed. What is the object that is most obvious? The pitchfork, okay. You all are aware of that. Did you see the mirror image of the pitchfork in the hem of his overalls? And in the 3 vertical lines of his shirt? The 3 vertical lines in each of the 2 windows on the bottom floor. you look at the two windows on the bottom floor as a unit, with the beam in the middle as the center, pulling up the pitchfork, you can see those three vertical lines there. How about the vertical line from the lightning rod at the peak of the roof that comes straight through the Gothic window, straight down the center beam of the lower windows, down the left side of the pitchfork, back up the right side of the pitchfork, up through the vertical line on the left of his shirt, by his neck, and ends where his eyebrow is raised. That's not a coincidence. Look at the shape of the curve at the bottom of the pitchfork and turn it over. That's the outline of his forehead. How about her, other than she's really not happy? The shape of her face is mirrored in the brooch that she's wearing, and it is echoed in the top and bottom of her collar, the white collar, and the curve of her apron. The fabric in her apron is very similar pattern to the fabric in the window upstairs. The house is apparently, at least as much as we can tell, completely boarded up. Not boarded up, excuse me, closed. The blinds are down. The potted plants on the front porch are dying. Well, these are motives. These are intentional things that Grant would put in this painting. Maybe some of them are unifying devices. Maybe some of them mean something. What I took from this after I started seeing all this was, well, I really thought I understood this painting because it was the farmers, it was that pitchfork guy. And then I started realizing there's much more going on here. The lesson it taught me was to look closer. Look deep, dive a little bit deeper. How many of you, by show of hands in the room, have played or studied or conducted the Holst First Suite? Look around the room. This is a piece we know really well, right? Okay, so we're going to dig in a little bit and try to talk about looking closer with the Holst First Suite. Now, I know that you know all these things, but we're basically going to rip through the entire First Suite in the next minute. Before we do that, what are some descriptive words that any of you, any kind of descriptive word, that would describe the Chaconne movement of the First Suite? Flowing. Constant. Gradual. What? Growth. Flowing, constant, gradual growth. Okay? All right, so you know this before. You've played this, you've heard it before. We start with an interval of a second, and then a fifth, and then a second. We see that throughout this whole suite, not just the Chaconne, the repeated melody in the first movement, but throughout the whole thing. I hope you can see this back there. But you know, at the beginning, this is in euphonium and tuba. The beginning of the second movement, the intermezzo. There it is again, the second and the fifth. In case you don't get it, you put it in the percussion part two. The second theme, where it goes into four, ba-da, starting here, ba-da-da-da-da. There's the same thing. Further along, at the end of the second movement, bum bum ba bum bum. The little Mannheim mock it up. Bum 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 bum. Turn the page, goes back down. Inversions. Bum 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 bum. And then another alteration of that inversion. Second and now fourth, the inversion of the fifth. This is the second theme of the march. There's those intervals again. Last page. Bum bum bum. In the low brass. From some of the transition material before. Here's another alteration and inversion. Here's the augmentation of that theme and inversion. It's throughout the whole thing. So we look closer and we start to find those things. You find resources that tell us, that point us in the direction of those, or maybe we find those things ourselves. What are some other ways to develop a melody? How can we look closer at something? Maybe start to understand your own learning style. Are you a visual person? Oral, kinesthetic? You don't know? That's okay. There's a whole lot of things that we can do in our classroom to help students understand these things. We can sing the melody. We can play the melody ourselves to help embed it in our brain a little bit more. Count it. tap or clap the rhythm, write out the melody. We'll talk about some of these things, stacking phrases, diagramming the contour. Stacking phrases, I mean this is the melody of the first melody of the other suite, all right? This looks like a set of 4 lines. It's really intended to be one melody, but I stack these melodies by phrases. So this is the beginning of Morris Dance, the first movement of the second suite. And I discovered a few years ago that just from a visual standpoint, when I can stack the phrases like this, it immediately pops out to me what's different. And I go back to Sesame Street a lot. One of these things is not like the other. Right? And what you see here is the first, second, fourth phrases are absolutely identical, even in articulations. Right? Another way to look at this would be to literally connect the dots. We're looking closer, but connect the dots. And you can see even more, the contour of these melodies are identical, not just rhythm and articulation. In fact, the contour of the one phrase that's different is almost in opposition to the other. Here's another way to stack melodies. This is the first 2 statements of Hartstow Grange, the second movement of Lincolnshire Posy. The top line is the soprano sax part. The other line is not the accompaniment, it's the flute part of the same melody that begins at measure 10. Now we know that as that movement is 4 statements of the same song. This is the same song, right? But he's writing to mimic the mood and the character of these particular singers that he recorded. So on the first statement by soprano sax, you have a quarter note pickup. The second time it occurs, it's a grace note that's after the bar line. It's the same melody, but it's written differently. In fact, every statement of that melody in that movement has a different beginning rhythm to it. It's a little deceptive because on this measure, the 5/4, and that there's a 3/2 underneath it. Actually, we could make it line up with beats. Everything after that 3/2 would be shifted over one, right? Because that one measure is one beat longer. But I think that's another way of helping ourselves understand how different our interpretation should be, or maybe could be, right? Here's another one. We just took the melody of this, took all the pitch away, and just looked at melody, you'd see the same thing. This is the same tune, written in very different ways. And we see that really clearly by stacking those. Another way to look closer at something. We talk with students often about transferring. We expect them to transfer concepts every day. So I'm going to ask you to transfer a few things with me related to this piece. And then as we dig a little bit deeper into a couple more paintings. Can you use your mind's ear to hear the euphonium playing this melody? We can. We don't talk about that much. We talk to young students especially about using your mind's eye. A terrific book by Bruce Adolph called The Mind's Ear. I highly recommend it. It's nothing but really short games that you can do to kind of spark your musical imagination. Can you hear a B-flat scale? Can you hear a B-flat scale by euphonium? Can you hear a B-flat scale by euphonium on the first note, clarinet on the second note, saxophone on the things like that? You absolutely can. If you can hear this in your mind's ear, you're going to be more adept at identifying issues in rehearsal, either right or wrong or related to nuance. Somebody in here has perfect pitch. Can you give us an E flat? Well, I don't know if that's right, but we're going to trust you. Let's sing. 1, 2. Good. You have an imaginary piano in front of you. Play it on the right hand. 1, 2. And sing. Both hands. Right hand's euphonium, left hand's tuba. 1, 2. Watch your hands. said it, we're still singing it, we're reinforcing it, we're getting it in the body. We've talked about analyzing this. We talked about the first 2, 3 intervals. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Have you seen this before? The first interval is a major second. The second one is a fifth. And then there's a second. Start on the second note. It's a fifth and a second. Start on the third note, go to the E flat. A second and a fifth. Start here. There's a fifth and a second and a fifth. Take this note out. A fifth and a second. Fifth and a second. Fifth and a second and a third. Fifth, second, and third. Fifth, second, third, etc. The first phrase, if you call it that, is an inversion of itself after the first note. Let's look at the second phrase and look in terms of harmonic implication. Single line melodies can have harmonic implication. See? Right? Dominant to tonic relationships. Outlining C. D to G outlines G. F to B flat outlines B flat. E flat, C, G, B flat. Those are the tonal centers of the entire suite. That's not a coincidence. Right? I'm not a composer, and by that I also mean I would be a lousy composer. If someone gave me an assignment to write an 8-bar chaconne melody, it would probably look something like this. It would start down here and come down a little bit. There'd be a little phrase marking, probably on the dominant. Then it'd come back here and go all the way back down, and it would end at the end on the dominant. We're in the key E flat. The dominant here is B flat. How many B flats do you see? This is a 25-beat melody, and 10 beats are the dominant. 40% of the melody that this long first movement is based on is just the single line note that is the dominant. Why does this movement sound flowing, gradual, connected, have growth? It's built in. He wanted you to feel that. Have you seen this before? This, I think, is probably the most important note. This tied note. What does this signify? Yes, the release. But he tells us what? How long does this last? I mean, this alone is a fourth of this melody. Right? I mean, we basically just did this melody and then we get to this plateau. He's telling us to go all the way to the end. Right? Because, have you noticed this before? When this happens, in the second statement, that starts again, right here. And there are more breaths that come in. The next time it happens, for the third statement, the, quote, new stuff, and that's the theoretical term. The new stuff starts on this beat. For the fourth statement, it starts here. By the time we get to right? He wrote a melody that is 8 measures long, that hangs out on the dominant for the last 2 measures, that allows the source material, or the new part, the new stuff, of the next section to begin in the last fourth of this. Why does this sound connected and gradual in growth? Because he built it that way. What does this mean? I think it means that Holst was one of the Illuminati. I think if we can find it in Holst, we're really likely to find it in other pieces that we do. This is Portrait of a Clown by Francis Kelly. This has form, structure, rhythmic motive, melodic motive, contrast, all of those things. Students can absolutely understand this. Absolutely. They're used to identifying Darth Vader's theme when they're 5. Right? They can understand this. Let's take it back younger, this is number 139 from Bruce Pearson Standard of Excellence, Yellow Rose of Texas. Unison, set up the horns. Unison, but there's rhythmic motive, there's melodic motive. You get the idea. Looking closer, a lesson that I can take from a painting that I thought I knew really well taught me to start looking at some things a little bit differently. And I dive a little bit deeper and try to go beyond just the usual harmonic analysis. Here's another one. I stumbled across this quote about 2 years ago, and I thought this was really, first of all, pretty self-deprecating, that an artist would say, yeah, there's nothing special about my art. It's just science. This is by a person that made this. By the way, both of these paintings are hanging down the street at the Chicago Institute Park. The person that said this, I don't see any poetry, I don't see any artistic merit, I just see science and method, created this. George Seurat created this in the 1880s. And this painting, first of all, it's a massive painting, it's very vivid, and according to specialists in art, it's nothing like it was initially. He worked on this painting for 19 months. And in doing what a lot of impressionists wanted to do, they would literally go outside and paint in open air. They were trying to capture light. One of the major focal points of impressionism in art was that they were trying to capture light. Monet and Renoir did that especially. You can see that examples of that here. But let's go back and look at Seurat's painting in terms of light. You can see there's a real strong emphasis of shadow and light here. Well, over a period of these 19 months, Seurat sought to follow these impressionistic ideas in a really different way. And he wanted to try to make paintings more vivid in light. He wanted to create more light in painting. So he took color away and he started doing sketches with pencil. These are dots, and you know that Seurat created pointillism, these combination of dots. You see the really faint line that would be the lake? It's very, very faint. I mean, he's really dealing with subtlety without color. Do you see her collar? Do you see her collar? There's not one there. Yeah, this is the image of a collar because of things he put around it. There's nothing there that really outlines a collar, but he's playing with light in a different way. All right, so after a few months, here's another sketch. By the way, there's about 60 sketches that lead up to this painting 9 months later. I just want to rip through a couple of these real quick. The dog in the foreground, the darkest thing in the painting. Do you see the light around him? Can you see that? There's a lighter area around him. This area, this deep shadow right behind it has a little strip that's a little bit lighter. Everywhere there's a dark area, it's surrounded by a lighter area. Important to point out here, there are no lines in any of this. But we see lines. We see collars, we see branches, we see a dog, we see the dog's tail wagging. But he did this by contrast of light and dark. This is based on what people had discovered in the mid-1800s called color theory. It's the idea that our eyes don't see color. Our eyes see light from color. Right? We don't really see color. We see the light from the color. This particular spot we're going to look at is over here on the left side of the painting where the boat is. There's a small gold sail. And I want to show you this because I also want to point out that in all of Seurat's paintings, he created a frame within the frame. Just to give everything a little bit more pop or punch, as they'd say on HGTV. Right? If there's something very light in the painting, he'll put a dark area in the frame around it. So this area up here, by the sail, is these colors. What I find most amazing about this painting is there's only 5 colors of paint. There's only 5 colors of paint in this painting, but he spent days and days and days putting them together in small combinations and dots, and then walking back across the studio to see what color it looked like. This is called optical mixture, I discovered. You see the parallel in music with chords? Right? You look at this painting up close, and as you back up across the room, the colors change because your eyes are receiving the light in different ways. At the same time, he was very enamored with ancient Egyptian art, particularly kind of the timelessness of these. It's a really famous quote by Seurat said, apparently all the Egyptians only had one eye. Here's a close-up of a gentleman lying down smoking a cigar. You can see the smoke coming out of it. There are no lines in this picture. I thought this was interesting because I perceive his hair as being salt and pepper. It's actually green and blue and tan and yellow. It's another thing in the painting. There's a little girl in the middle. And a close-up of her face. You can see the outline of parts of her face really clearly. Hang with me here, we're getting back to music. Here's a close-up of her face. So in the final months, he started to get an idea of the structure of this painting, and he would go out and do open air just to get a sense of the light. And then you can see this painting gradually take shape with light and dark, and people and a certain bend and a certain tree. You can see more experimentation with color. And the light in the painting gets brighter as he increases this effectiveness in this technique. The dog is actually red and blue and green. And then there's one of the final rough sketches and then the final product. What I got from this was look closer at form. What I thought I understood to be very specific lines, and what looks like to me very, very staged, timeless set of people. It's actually just my eyes perceiving lines. How many pieces do we know where a structure or a form is created by a different texture? Or play Hindemith Symphony, maybe that's an extreme example, but you know all those woodwind parts? Right? Hindemith called them a background screen. Right? Or maybe another way to look at it, what elements can create form, or create structure, or create contrast? Here's another way to look at it. Here is a very, very rough outline of the Holst first suite, first movement. It's an 8-measure theme, and it happens 16 times. Right? There are 2 of those statements that aren't 8 measures. Right? One's 9 and one's 10. You see those there? So that literally took like maybe 2 minutes to find the form. What would have taken us days to do a complete harmonic analysis, we can find the form very quickly. If we just did, this is a very non-musical approach to looking at dynamics, but I know some of you have used the Guide to Score study by Frank Battisti, terrific text about how to analyze pieces. He talks about using a bar graph or maybe just an outline that shows kind of the contour of dynamics. These are all the different statements of the Chaconne across the bottom, and then looking at dynamics, here's the shape of the piece. This is the dynamic contour of this. This really informed my view of this piece a lot. You know, I told you about that 1/8 note and how it connects. Do you know the spot where the inversion begins? Yes? That 8th note is not present there. It's the only piece in the entire Chaconne movement where there's not a connection. And many times, many of you do this, but also many of you may not have heard before, there's a seam there, what you might call a seam, a structural joint, and a lot of people take just a slight pause and put silence there. That happens right there. Right? It crescendos up all the way to B, brillante, and it comes back down. And that happens there. We have many recordings of people that we really respect as interpreters, and very often you'll hear a very slight pause here. It's the only spot where there's silence in this. And then the piece begins again and goes a little bit further. All right, let's tear through a couple of others. This is the Red Studio by Henri Matisse. Take a look at this, please, and see all of the things around the room This is an autobiographical painting. These are all things that he created that are sitting in this room. Paintings, a plate, some sculpture. You see the line on the left where the wall meets the floor? And the table on the lower left, and the chair on the lower right, and the table behind it, and then the two little stands holding up sculptures. Looks like a little dresser there, maybe a grandfather clock. And then in between that painting and something else, you see what could be where that wall meets the floor. You see all those lines? Yes? No? Those are not lines. There's no paint there. This really shocked me about this. He didn't paint there. It's called a reserve line, and there's literally no paint here. He painted everything except those things. Everything that provides structure in this room is you thinking that you see a line. What's our reserve line in music? Rests, or maybe more aptly, silence. Right? How many pieces do you know where silence is a major component, either in the structure of the piece or maybe has an emotional component? Childhood Hymn, Holst Hammersmith, Of Our New Day Begun that we heard yesterday by Omar Thomas, right? Sleep by Eric Whitacre. Right? Sometimes we forget to look for those things. This is another painting by Gustav Klimt. This is a portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer. If you haven't seen The Monuments Men, the movie, I'd recommend it. And even more than that, check out The Wraith of Europa, a documentary on Netflix. It's about the Third Reich's basically pillaging of all great art in Europe. Outside to the public, they said they wanted to eradicate everything that was not German. Behind closed doors, they were collecting this art. Hitler had a list of things that he wanted to collect of European art. And this was one of the pieces that he earmarked. This is by Gustav Klimt, a Polish Jew, and it's a portrait of an Austrian, a Viennese Jew, and Hitler wanted it. Klimt, I chose this because, man, there's just a lot to see here. We're going to start on the upper left of her face, see the red squares? We're going to go to the right and then down kind of clockwise. This is Gold Leaf. If you ever have a chance to go to New York, go across the street from the Museum of Modern Art to the Neue Gallery. There's a home there, and I use the term home loosely. It's a really nice home. And this painting is on the third floor. Most of this is a real gold leaf. There's an enormous amount of ornamentation in this. Almost to the extent that the only thing that's not ornamented is her face and upper body. And Klimt was really influenced by Byzantine tile and Italian tile. So a lot of these areas, frankly, are just a lot of busy work. Right? Background screen. But if you look at this, and maybe squint a little bit, and look at the dark areas, you can start to see the outline of her figure. Or if you look at the areas to the left and right of the swirls, little spirals, you can see the outline of the chair that she's sitting in. Or the colors and circles on both sides of her face, you can see the outline of the wingback chair. Or everything down below her flowing gown. Another example of how texture and pattern can create form in music. One more here. This is from 1941. Jacob Lawrence wrote a series called the Migration Series. It's a set of about 60 panels, and this told the story of the Great Migration of African Americans from the South, post-Jim Crow, into the North, post-Industrial Revolution, following more jobs. This is one of the most famous panels of the series, and the sentence to the left is the title of the panel. This is a remarkable painting. It is so economical, and there's so many things at work here that show the concept that he mentions in the sentence. They also found discrimination in the north, although it was much different from that which they had known in the south. Look at the gentleman on the upper left and how aloof he is. In his posture, and the gentleman on the lower left, he looks pretty stern, his unibrow. And look at the size of his hands, how he's gripping that paper. Look at the people on the right and the scale of their bodies compared to the left. And look at their posture. The woman on the lower right has a hat that's pulled down over her, almost over her eyes. Look at the dividing line at the very top, the gold line, and let your eyes flow down that line and recognize that it takes you to each person. Like if you haven't seen them already, follow that line down from top to bottom. You see that? How about the angles of chairs and angles of tables and angles of their posture? Start at the top again and see how it shows that. I mean, everything in this painting shows the divide between these people. This is a remarkable painting where everything, all these different elements of art are working together. And I wish more of us could look at music this way, right? Other than score study and harmonic analysis, how do so many things fit together to achieve the whole? Let's go back to this. Can I ask you to do a few more things with this? Everybody stand up for a minute, please. So put your left and right hand down in front of you, kind of extend it out, and imagine there's an imaginary line now, and that is the bar that exists below the YouTube screen. You know, the scrolling bar that reads left to right? Okay, so take your right hand, let's see if I can get up here with it. Take your right hand, and we're going to sing and trace the melody with our hands. Starting over here on the left, we'll read from the left, all right? Give us our E flat again. Okay, 1, 2. Just follow the contour. Keep going. Okay, so this is in part to get everybody to wake up. This is warming the room, but also to get you to feel the contour of this melody. We're going to go a little bit quicker, and I want you to be very specific. Watch this. Start on E flat. Check this out. Go up a sixth and come back down to E flat before you get to the halfway point. And then go down another sixth. You see that? E flat, up a sixth, down to E flat, then down a sixth. Then you're halfway through. Then the second half is all those dominant tonic relationships. Then the last part is going to go for the plateau. Okay? 1, 2. 1, 2. So one more time before you sit down, would you just outline that quickly, just like you just did, like fast forward through that shape? Okay, yeah, have a seat. So you just outlined the contour of the melody. We're trying to look closer and find different ways to learn melodies. Look at the dynamic scheme of a movement. This is Jacob Lawrence working on another level, in another art form, right? All the things work together in Jacob Lawrence's painting to show the divide between that. Everything in this, right? The contour of the melody is the contour of the dynamics, right? What happens in 8 measures happens across 8 minutes as well. In case you're not sure or believe that. Let's go back to the second theme of the march. Follow the contour. 1, 2, 1. It's the same thing, it's the same shape. Right? All elements are working together. It's definitely Illuminati stuff. All right, one more thing I want to share with you, and that is a really important lesson I learned a month ago. We did a civil rights tour with our wind ensemble. We prepared the music of William Grant Still, Douglas Hailstork, Wayne Milburn, Omar Thomas, the piece that some of you heard yesterday by the Cobb County Community Group. We We took a tour, and our first stop was at Little Rock Central High School. Right? Very pivotal place in Downers for verification, segregation case. We also did a stop at the National Civil Rights Museum. In the past, we've always done a performance at home, and then we go to the tour. This time we did the tour first and the performance at the end, and we brought in Omar Thomas. And it was remarkable how differently the ensemble played at every stop along the way. I intentionally had not talked about specific things about civil rights except about particular events, but there's some really eye-opening things at these two places. And it was amazing how the context for the players changed. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it was profoundly different in the performance. So let's talk about context. And why shouldn't we share that with students? We looked at this painting earlier. I told you this painting was created in 1930 in Iowa. It's the height of the Great Depression. Post-Dust Bowl, economy had crashed, farms had crashed. This painting was influenced by the timelessness of Egyptian hieroglyphics. Look at how well staged everything is. There are no bodies or objects overlapping. Recognize also that there's no one looking at you. The painting starts to change when you see that no one's looking at you. And then you realize, well, there is one person looking at me. Do you see her? The girl in the white dress? Yeah. Seurat's daughter was 3 years old and died the previous year while he was working on these. It's the last thing he added in the sketches. That changes your perception of this painting. And especially when you're standing in front of it, it's very profound. Some of you know this, Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, another pop culture painting almost. Really briefly recognize, I know that you know some of the background of this. Outside of that diner, there are no signs of life. Right? In the shops behind or in the windows. The people actually are Hopper said later after this, people are encased in that diner. There's no entrance or exit. We don't even know that they're talking with each other. This was 1942, the height of the violence of World War II. A lot of cities had not been emptied entirely, but there were many, many people, particularly men, that were missing from cities. And there was a strong sense of loneliness, not only from that, but also how urban life had grown so much in America. And a lot of Hopper's paintings reflect that. So although we look at this and think, oh, it's like a 40s or 50s diner, and there's something else going on here. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope that in leaving here today, you start to think about how informal education and what it is that inspires you or really grabs you can influence how you prepare to teach. And the tracks start to merge a little bit different. If it's gardening, or coffee, or working out, fitness, bodybuilding, faith, ministry, moon landing conspiracy theories, whatever it is. Could be activity, could be skill, could be art. We can use those things as a way to kind of point back on our vocation and our formal education. And think about this, score analysis is only a step towards comprehension, right? We can do analysis of all these different elements of music and then help us understand how to comprehend these things. And I think in many ways, our teaching becomes much more compelling, whether we're dealing with sixth graders or university students. Can you harness that creative energy and point it back to how you study scores? Your understanding of the score will help your teaching in musicianship become much more compelling. I want to leave you with this. Just found this a few days ago. It's a quote by George Seurat. Not only describes pointillism, but a lot of the things that we talk about. Great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Terrific. Thank you very much for being here.